Well, it's nice to finally be here in your congregation. You're experiencing one of the downsides of having the last circuit overseer visit you right before he leaves. That's because when the circuit overseer changes, you'll be one of the last congregations to get him. And so we're going to serve your congregation, and then we also will serve the Crawford congregation next week, and we'll have made one whole circuit through our circuit. It's hard to believe that we've been here almost 6 months now. It's a delight to be here in your congregation here in Smith. We look forward to a fine week of activity with your congregation. What we thought we might do is answer a few questions. You notice that in our Bible teach book, it poses a lot of questions, and then we tell the householder that we'll answer those questions as we go through our study. And so you probably have all sorts of questions. In fact, this evening I was asked, well, where did that hymn thing come from in your name? We thought that when we heard that Billy Kim Nichols was coming, we thought that maybe you were an Oriental or something like that. Well, we all come from Adam, so I guess maybe I am. But really, the Kim comes from the fact that my dad his name is Billy also, so since he's a circuit overseer in Nevada, the branch office said that we got to figure out some way to keep you straight besides keeping you on opposite ends of the country. So he has to go by his full name, and I have to use my full name, and they still can't keep her straight. Every once in a while I'll get mail from him, and he'll get mail from me, and says to me, he says, take your time mailing me the things that they send you. Don't get in a big hurry, because it just means work when I get something like that. So don't be in a big hurry. So one day they sent me his vacation, and I said, oh, Dad, thanks a lot for sending me that vacation. He goes, give that to me right now. So there are certain things that he wants right away. Well, maybe a little bit about us. I grew up in the truth. You ever hear the little stories about the preacher's kid? No? Something went wrong in the Kingdom Hall, or if there was a disturbance or something got broke, I was generally the one that was involved. I learned the truth from the bottom up. My dad would take me out in the lobby, and I'd spend a lot of time looking at the shoelaces, and he'd get right to the seat of the problem, and I'd come back in and I'd learn the truth. I guess when I was a little fellow, my grandmother told my dad, she says, Billy Lee, if you get that boy pointed in the right direction, we got a circuit servant on our hand, and if you don't, may God help us all. So my parents have worked hard, and my two sisters and I benefited from their loving direction and their counsel as we grew up. I have an older sister and a younger sister. They're both in the truth as well. In fact, they both pioneered for a good number of years. My older sister, when she got out of high school, and then in 1974, my parents and my younger sister and I joined her in the full-time pioneer work. And we were able to pioneer together as a family for a couple of years. And then my little sister got married, and she moved away, started having a family, so she had to give up pioneering. My older sister had some health problems. She's had a couple bouts with cancer, and so she's had to stop pioneering. But as I mentioned, my parents were able to continue. They moved where the need was great, and eventually they went and circuit worked 26 years ago. And in about 2.5 hours, he's going to be in a congregation in Nevada, starting this same program with the congregation there. And then 12 years ago, my wife and I went and circuit worked. I met her after I'd been pioneering a couple of years. She was like Sister Brooke Alvin. She was pioneering while she went to high school. So she wasn't in homeschool. She had a real light class load. And so I told her I would be happy to help her be successful in pioneering. No ulterior motive there. So I would pick her up with the car group at school, and we would go right out into the field service, and we'd spend the late afternoon and early part of the evening in the field service together. And then she started to explain to me that she wanted to go where the need was great. And so in 1978, I convinced her that the need was great at my house. And we've been pioneering together ever since. So that's how we got together. Now, she learned the truth when she was coming into the middle school years. She was about 13 when she learned the truth. And she has 2 brothers and 2 sisters that all accepted the truth as well. An older brother and an older sister, and one of each that are younger. It's interesting that when they were coming into the truth, her older sister was a senior in high school, and when the school year started, she was the homecoming queen. She was very popular and was involved in all sorts of things. By the end of the school year, She had already completed her study of the truth book, and she had embraced the truth and was getting ready to symbolize her dedication, and they wanted her to be the prom queen. And she says, I can't be the prom queen. I'm not even going to go to the prom. And she didn't want to be involved in the school activities anymore. Kind of an interesting thing. Here's a young girl coming into the truth that recognized that after-school social functions were going to keep her out of the truth. Something that some young people in the truth have a hard time understanding. My wife's older brother was on the varsity basketball team. And he came home from school one day and told his parents that he was going to resign from the team. Now, they were in the middle of a winning season, and he's 6'4". And so he was pretty useful on the basketball team. But his parents said, oh, you don't have to quit the team. You can be a Jehovah's Witness and be on the team. And he goes, oh, no, you can't. He said, I won't be able to go to meetings because of the games. I miss a lot of field service because of basketball practice and personal study time. And he says, and you don't have any idea what we talk about in the locker room and what goes on a school bus on the way to and from games. He says, you can't be in the truth and be on the team. So he quit. So he becomes the truth. Kind of interesting lesson for some of our young people in the congregation today, too, isn't it? Some of them have a hard time understanding that concept. You can't be in the truth and be on the team. At least not be successful at it. Now, my wife didn't have some of those problems. She was involved in student council and after-school clubs, but she gave all that up, too, so she could come in the truth. And then her younger brother and sister followed the example of her parents. My wife's dad, when he heard that Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate Christmas with 5 kids, he says, ooh, that's the church for me. Sign me up. So he was a quick sell on the truth because we were happy about not celebrating Christmas anymore. Now, when we went in circle work 12 years ago, there's 12 in our immediate family, 5 in my family, and 7 in my wife's family, and 10 of them were in full-time service with us. So we had some good peer pressure that kept us going. And so that's when we were out in Northern California at our first assignment. It wasn't difficult to get support to stick with the full-time service. Then after we had 3 years in Northern California, we were told that we were going to have another circuit in Northern California. We started off with the redwood trees right on the coast of Northern California, beautiful circuit. We didn't think it could get much better than that until we got our second assignment, and it was Napa in Sonoma Valley. And man, we thought, this is great. Well, about 5 weeks before we went to Napa in Sonoma Valley, we got a letter from the society that said that they'd changed their mind, and we were being sent to Georgia Circuit number 2, which is the southeastern corner of Atlanta. In fact, if you did some channel surfing today, you saw that Newburgh Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia. They were just building that thing when we were up there, that 10,000-seat church where they had Mrs. King's funeral today. Now, that was just being built while we were there. But now it's built and full and had their scandals and everything. And they just keep on going. But we had a circuit up there. We had Stone Mountain and Decatur, part of the southeastern part of Atlanta. And we spent 3 years there, and then we went to Pennsylvania for 6 years. We spent some time in the Amish country where there's a lot of Amish and Mennonite people. And then we went over to the western part of Pennsylvania for 3 years outside Pittsburgh, where all the coal mines used to be. And they're starting to do a little bit more coal mining in that country. But it was kind of a depressed community, a lot of older folks. But it was nice territory, nice people to work. And now we're back here in Georgia, and we are loving it. And we are having a good time, so we're happy to be back in your circuit. You know, we mentioned that we had 10 in our family that were in full-time service. Good peer pressure. Now, peer pressure, we normally think about peer pressure that something is bad, don't we? Peer pressure is trying to make us conform or to bend or to compromise our standards on something. And we're made to feel, left out or outside the loop. But as my wife and I discovered, peer pressure can be a good thing, too. So we can have pressure or a good influence to continue on in a chosen course, and we can be encouraged by what other people around us do in what they say. And we have that very experience in the Bible as we look at the Bible. Our instruction talk this evening encouraged us to use the Bible to cope with daily pressures and anxieties and solve problems. The Bible can also make us determined, and it can fortify us to want to do the work that Jehovah has given us. Because we have examples in the Bible of individuals that were fortified by Jehovah to be successful, and we can know that we too can be that, and Jehovah will help us. Why don't we look at a few examples in the Bible of individuals that were fortified to accomplish their assignment in the face of overwhelming odds. The first one that we'd like to direct your attention to is found in Genesis chapter 6. The first few verses of Genesis chapter 6 introduce us to a situation that developed in the days of Noah. Verses 1 and 2 tell us that it happened to be in the days when the sons of man were growing in number, that the spirit sons of God saw that the offspring of the women were good looking. And they began to cultivate some wrong, immoral desires, and the Bible says that they came and forsook their proper dwelling place, and they went taking for themselves wives, whomever they wanted. As a result of that, the earth became a place that was full of wickedness and violence and morality. In fact, verse number 4 tells us that the Nephilim proved to be in the land in those days, and they too contributed to the violence and the wickedness of the world around us. But if you look over to the end of chapter 6, the Bible tells us that Noah walked with the true God, and he did just so. Well, how could it be that Noah could walk with God amid all of that wickedness? Noah was given an outstanding assignment, too, that he should build an ark, that he should preach the good news and give a judgment message to the world of that day. And that's what Noah did when he walked with God, and did just so. He accomplished the work that Jehovah gave him in a physical way, as well as in a spiritual way, the preaching of the news, while maintaining his separateness and his aloofness from the world around him. Not an easy assignment. Do you think Noah had it easy when he went to build the ark? Do you think that the individuals in Noah's day didn't give him any opposition whatsoever? Now, the Bible doesn't relate the kind of problems that he had, but do you think that some of those Nephilim and some of those wicked demons, do you think that they might have tried to hinder his building the ark? Perhaps even tried to undo what he was accomplishing? We can be assured that they didn't take the building of the ark laying down. They were going to try to thwart Jehovah's purpose. And yet Noah completed the assignment on time, and he was able to preach a judgment message to the people. What made Noah able to do that? Well, the answer was the same one that was pointed out to us this evening in our Bible highlights, or in our instruction talk, rather. It was Jehovah's Spirit that helped him to carry those gates up the mountain, wasn't it? And it was Jehovah's Spirit that fortified Noah to accomplish the work at hand. And it's Jehovah's Spirit that will fortify us to do the work at hand today, of preaching the good news in a very wicked and violent world while maintaining our separateness, not allowing discouragement and opposition to stop us. Now, there's another example in the Bible that could help us. Maybe it's something that some of us could relate to. It's found in the book of Exodus, the 6th chapter. Exodus, the 6th chapter, and we're going to look at the last couple of verses at Exodus chapter 6. The middle of verse number 29 and verse number 30. Jehovah gave instructions to Moses, and this is what he told Moses. He says, I am Jehovah. Speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything that I am speaking to you. Then Moses said before Jehovah, look, I'm uncircumcised in lips, so how will Pharaoh ever listen to me? You know, one Bible translation to the contemporary English version of the Bible says that Moses said to Jehovah, but you know I'm a very poor speaker. The king will never listen to me. And according to another Bible in modern English, Moses protested, but will you know that I stutter? Will the king really listen to me? Apparently Moses felt inadequate for the job. To appear before Pharaoh and give Pharaoh his messages and his decrees. And yet Jehovah promised Moses that he would provide a mouth for him, and I will teach you, and I will tell you what to say. You go and speak to Pharaoh all the things that I've told you. And wouldn't you agree that Moses did a pretty good job? That with Jehovah's help, with the strength from Jehovah, and the counsel that Jehovah gave him, that Moses, he reached down deep inside and he found some courage, and he went and appeared before Pharaoh time and time again. And as Pharaoh became ever more obstinate and stubborn, Moses persisted. He didn't give up. Now, what about us today? Any of you ever make the statement when you were coming to the truth that you'll never get me to go door to door? Anybody ever say that? Yes, and here we are. We go door to door, right? When you came to the Kingdom Hall, and maybe you came to your first theocratic ministerial service meeting, and you had those student assignments on the platform, and you just looked at those folks and you shook your head. And you'll never see me getting up on a platform like that and giving a Bible talk. Anybody say that? See, but there we are. I can relate to Moses because when I was in first grade, second grade, they put me in a speech therapy class because I stuttered, and the speech therapist said, "There ain't nothing we can do for him." So my folks enrolled me in theocratic ministry school, and guess what? Took care of that problem. Through theocratic ministry school. So indeed, we get fortified by Jehovah. See, some of us said that we never give a talk, some of us said we never preach, and yet here we're doing it. Let's face it, none of us really enjoy the ministry, do we? Some of us have learned to enjoy it, but we're not cut out for it. It's not normal for us. We weren't born to this assignment. But we've just resigned ourselves that with Jehovah's help and Jehovah's Spirit, we're going to accomplish the work that Jehovah gives us. And so we've, just said, until the end of this system, I think that book bag's going to be an extension of my hand. So if you're one of those that feels like maybe you can't do it, that the ministry's not easy for me. Remember Moses? Jehovah simply told Moses, get over it and get the job done. I'll help you. I'll support you. And Jehovah did, didn't he? See, Jehovah's going to help us and support us today too. Through the organization, through the theocratic ministry school, through our brothers, and through assistance personally. Jehovah gives us everything that we need to be successful in accomplishing the work that he gives us to do. Another example of one who was fortified by Jehovah to accomplish the work at hand. Look at 1 Samuel chapter 17. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, we have the example of David when he was just a young man. David was sent by his father to go to the military camp of the Israelites to see how his brothers were doing and to bring back a report of how the battles were going, how the war was going, so that he could have an update. Well, as David got close to the military camp of Israel, he saw something that was greatly disturbing to him. The Israelites were here, and the Philistines were over here, and standing out in front of the Philistines was a giant. And this giant, Goliath, was hurling abuses and taunts at the Israelites. And he was challenging them to come out and face me man to man. Send out a champion and let him and I fight one another, and to the victor goes the spoils. Or what is wrong? Are you afraid of little old me? He said. Come on. David got into the military camp, and all of the soldiers were terror-stricken. And David's like, somebody's got to do something about this reproach upon Jehovah and upon his name. And you can almost imagine those soldiers in the camp of Israel who are like, who's going to do that? And David says, I'll do it. I'll fight Goliath. Can you imagine the response that got from the soldiers? Here they are terrified. They don't want to fight Goliath. And here comes this little boy, a teenager. He comes into the camp and he says, I'll fight Goliath. What's wrong with you men, you sissies? I'll fight him. They said, you can't fight him. You're not even, you're still wet behind the ears. We're not going to let you go out there and fight Goliath. Go home and tend to your daddy's sheep like a good little boy. Well, apparently David's zeal caught the attention of the king. So notice what it says in verse number 31. It says, the words that David spoke came to be heard, and they went telling them before Saul. Hence he fetched him. David proceeded to say to Saul, do not let the heart of any man collapse within him. Your servant himself will go out and actually fight with this Philistine. Saul probably couldn't believe what he was hearing. Here's a boy saying, I will go out and fight with the Philistine. Your Majesty, don't let your heart collapse within you. I will save you. I'll fight for you. The king was like, I can't believe this. And he tells David, he says, I can't let you do it, son. I appreciate your zeal and your enthusiasm, but, he's a man of war from his youth up, and you're but a boy. He'd chew you out and spit you out in little pieces. What would I tell your daddy if you got killed? I can't let you do it. David persisted and said in verse number 34, he says, your servant became a shepherd of his father among the flock, and there came a lion and also a bear, and each carried off a sheep from the drove. And I went out after it and struck it down and made the rescue from its mouth. When it began rising against me, I grabbed hold of its beard and struck it down and put it to death. Both the lion and the bear your servant struck down. Think about what David just described there. He said, I was a servant in my father's sheep. So this was some time ago, he said. I'm not even as old and as big as I am now. And a lion came out of the mountains, and the footnote in the reference Bible says it was the African lion, the maned lion. This big male lion came down out of the mountain and carried off a sheep. And he says, I left the sheep behind. I went into the bush after it, and I took it. I grabbed a hold of it, and I killed it, and I rescued the sheep. Now think about that for a second. He didn't say I saved the carcass. He said, I made the rescue from its mouth. Have you ever tried to take a bone or a toy away from your family pet? You know that little chihuahua Trudy? Think suddenly he's a Rottweiler? And you can't get him to turn loose of his food or his toy, can you? Not without some danger, perhaps getting nipped. Can you imagine going into the bush, into the forest, after a lion who has just carried off a sheep from your field and then taking the sheep away from him? And when the lion rears up to defend its meal, you grab a hold of it by the beard and you pull it down close and you kill it with a knife or your bare hand. And David said, both the lion and the bear I did that way. I went out after the bear too, he said. And I caught that bear, and I took the sheep back, and I killed the bear. And David said, and this Philistine will become just like one of them, because he has taunted the battle lines of the living God of Israel. See, David experienced those things when he was a young boy, and David probably understood when it happened that this was rather unusual. He probably understood that Jehovah had to help him when he fought the bear and the lion. But now when Jehovah and David saw that Jehovah's name was at stake, and here stands this Philistine giant, now David understood why Jehovah had helped him kill the bear and the lion. Jehovah was preparing him for this moment. And David was confident that just like the bear and the lion, that Goliath would fall at his hands all the time. So when he went out to face Goliath, told Goliath, he said, you come with me with a spear and a javelin. He said, I come to you in the name of Jehovah. Today, Jehovah will deliver you into my hand. And David pulled back his sling, and he started swinging his sling, and he let the stone go. And as Paul Harvey says, you know the rest of the story. David was fortified to accomplish Jehovah's work, wasn't he? See, Jehovah can do the same for us today, too. See, Jehovah can help us to be able to surmount mountain-like obstacles. Giant problems can be whittled down to size with the help of Jehovah and His Word, His Spirit, and the organization. See, we can have confidence that Jehovah will fortify us for the work at hand, too. But we don't have to resort just to looking at the old part of the Bible, the Hebrew Scriptures, to find examples of Jehovah's fortifying His people. Turn with me to the book of Acts chapter 4. And let's notice one a little closer to home. Acts chapter 4. And notice in verse number 19 and 20. The setting here is that Peter and John have been arrested again. They've been taken before the Sanhedrin court, the chief priests and the magistrates, and they are told, didn't we tell you to quit preaching about Jesus? And instead of quitting, you went out and you just kept right on going. Now, Stop. Knock it off. Stop preaching about Jesus. Reminds us of our instruction talk. The brother talked about the experiences in Romania. Reminds us about the religious and political opposition of our brothers in Romania. And like Peter and John, they refused to quit. In fact, in verse number 19, Peter and John said, whether it's righteous in the sight of God to listen to you rather than to God, judge for yourself. But as for us, we cannot stop preaching about the things that we've seen and heard. Well, they were sternly ordered. They were given a command, and the court charged them, and then they set them free. Now, verse number 23 says that after they were released, they assembled their brothers together, and they explained to them what had gone on. Do you think the meeting that they had there that night went something like this? That Peter and John were standing in front of the congregation. They said, you know, friends, we are in a peck of trouble. We got a serious problem. We have roused the ire and the anger of the Sanhedrin and the religious leaders of Jerusalem, and they've commanded and they've ordered us to stop preaching. So I guess we better go someplace else. Maybe we should slow down just a little bit. Maybe we should not be quite so persistent in our preaching. That's what they said. Or do you think that they said, you know, we've got a problem here. We have the anger of the Sanhedrin and the religious leaders, and they're telling us that we have to stop preaching. And when they hauled us into court, we told them in no uncertain terms that we are not going to stop preaching. And brothers, that was what we want to encourage you to do. Don't give in to the fear and the pressure of these wicked men. Trust in Jehovah to fortify you, and don't quit preaching. Which scenario do you think happened? I'll do the second, right? Well, the congregation, that meeting came to a close. The account says that the congregation raised their voices in prayer, and one of the thoughts that they prayed about was found for us in verse number 29, where it says, and now, Jehovah, give attention to their threats and grant your slaves to keep speaking your word with all boldness, while you stretch out your hand for healing, and while signs and portents occur through the name of your holy servant Jesus. Oh, Jehovah, please give us courage. Don't let them cause fear to take root in our hearts. Strengthen us, please. The very next verse says, when they had made their supplication, the house that they were in was shaken. They were one and all filled with Holy Spirit. And they were speaking the word of God. Now, I'll guarantee you, if this house starts to shake, I'm out that door. See, but on that occasion, when Jehovah shook the building, it was another miraculous manifestation of His Holy Spirit. And they were strengthened by it. Most of us would be terrified if the building started shaking, wouldn't it? And yet they were strengthened by it. And they were fortified, and they continued to preach the good news with boldness. Now, we don't expect Jehovah to shake the house for us tonight. When we pray that Jehovah give us boldness and grant us courage to keep speaking His word. But just as surely as He answered that prayer in the first century, we know He'll answer. And Jehovah gives us what we need, doesn't He? You know, through our district conventions, our circuit assemblies, didn't we receive that beautiful tool at the district convention? What does the Bible really teach? And Jehovah was fortifying us for the work at hand, to perhaps experience tremendous growth of people coming into the truth. He gives a special week like this one to fortify us and to build us up and to help us to be determined that we're going to preach the good news. So we're going to make the preaching of the good news a big part of our schedule this week. Starting tomorrow at 9 o'clock, we'll go out in field service every morning, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And then at 1:15 in the afternoon on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And Sunday we'll have the opportunity to go out in the ministry after the meeting. Now, you know, service on Sunday shouldn't be a real problem because the Super Bowl is over. So there's no reason to rush home, and there's nothing really pressing. Where we got to watch. The NASCAR really hasn't started yet, so we don't have to worry about that. And we can spend some time. But again, we can help people in our community see that we're different. This is not just church for us. We don't go to the Kingdom Hall on Sunday and then immediately go to the restaurant. But we perhaps got something good to share with other people, so we can demonstrate it as a little bit more than church. And maybe Jehovah can fortify us to share in the ministry on Sunday as a congregation as well. You know, it's nice to see that our congregation continues to be busy and active. We continue to have a fairly low number of irregular publishers. It's nice to have 3 new regular pioneers, isn't it? We've got the 2 sisters up here. And we had Brother Ben Jensen, too, started regular pioneering. He had that nice experience of the guy with the ran out of gas. Leave it to a pioneer to figure out a way to take something, a good deed, to turn it into a good cause. So it's nice that we're able to have those. Along with our old-time pioneers, we're happy to be able to have them. They're going to have, I think, 6 in your congregation go to Pioneer Service School later this year, so that's going to be exciting for them and exciting for the congregation as well. You know, we talked about good peer pressure. We had the scriptures. We had examples in the first century. But, you know, we don't have to look clear back there to find good examples. You know, we can find good examples of those that have been fortified to do Jehovah's work a little closer to home. Let me tell you about a young girl that we met when we went to the circuit there in Atlanta. She came from Nigeria when she was about 14 years of age because of some persecution that was coming upon her. You see, when she was like 13, she wanted to get baptized. And her father had routinely been, on occasion, beating her when she would come home from the meetings because he didn't want her to be a Jehovah's Witness. And so her father would beat her when she went out in service or when she came home from the meeting, trying to discourage her. When she decided that she wanted to be baptized, her father told her that you'll think that the beatings that you've been receiving are nothing compared to the one you'll get if you go off and get baptized. Well, Chioma did just that. She went off and got baptized, and true to his word, her father beat her like he hadn't beaten her before. In fact, he put her in the hospital this time. She still carries scars to this day. Well, when she was getting better from being in the hospital, her mother realized that if Chioma goes home, her dad's going to kill her. So he sent her to the United States, and so she's about 14 and a half when she gets here. She has to get a full-time job, but she starts regular pioneering. Now, we met her when she was still pioneering and still working full-time, supporting herself. When we got up to Atlanta, I had a hard time understanding why Chioma would call me Dad and call my wife Mom. But then my wife reminded me, well, we're old enough to be her parents, and she needs some parents, so how about we adopt her? Okay, we'll adopt her. So Chioma was our adopted daughter. She still called us Mom and Dad, and we got 3 grandkids in Nigeria somewhere. But she kept on pioneering. And when she turned about 20, there was a brother in Nigeria that knew her when she was growing up, and he asked Chioma to come to Nigeria, and the rascal convinced Chioma that the meat was great in Nigeria. But she moved back to Nigeria, continues to pioneer. As I said, she's got 3 children. She has to carry water to her house in jugs. She has electricity a couple hours a day. And yet she continues to pioneer. And interestingly, her father, who used to beat her, he's now older and he's sick, and Chioma takes care of her father, despite the way he treated her. Now, through all of that, she maintained her joy and her determination, and she continues to pioneer to this day. Now, if Jehovah can help somebody in her situation pioneer, what about us? See, Jehovah can help us too. He fortified her, and he helped her to be strong and be determined, and he can help us to do something similar. You know, in other places in the world, our brothers have faced some pretty difficult situations. You know, we got ready to come to the meeting this evening, and we had to just make sure that we gave ourselves enough time to go outside and saddle up the horse and hook up the wagon. And no, we didn't do that, did we? We got to go outside, and we jumped in our nice car, we turned the ignition, and we made sure that the seat was adjusted just right, the air temperature was just right, heat or air conditioning depend upon your preference. Maybe you even adjusted the tune so that they were playing just right, Oh man, it's just what a hassle. I have to drive 20 minutes to get to the Kingdom Hall. Oh, just so far to go. You know, our brothers in some places, they walk to get to the Kingdom Hall. And they don't walk just for 20 minutes, they walk for hours to get to the Kingdom Hall. In fact, in one place in El Salvador, our brothers have to ford a river to get to the Kingdom Hall. Can you imagine having to cross over the Chattahoochee River to get to the Kingdom Hall? Now, maybe sometimes of the year, they tell us up by Franklin, there's a few places where you could just walk across the river. It wouldn't be a problem. And that's the way it is there in El Salvador, that they can just walk across the river, no problem, because it's not that deep. But when it rains and when the wintertime comes, that river gets swollen by the rainwater, and there's dead animals and stumps and trash and all sorts of stuff coming down the river, and you can't walk across it. You have to swim across it. And yet our brothers in that little congregation, they never miss meeting. What they do is they meet on one side of the river, and they put all of their meeting clothes in a big steel pot, a tin pot, a tinia they call it. And then they put a piece of plastic over the top of it, tie it on, and the strongest swimmer starts pushing this steel pot across the river, and he uses it kind of for life support. And he swims across the river, and he puts the pot on the other side of the river. And then his job is to help everybody else get across the river. When everybody's across the river, they put on their dress clothes, and they arrive at the Kingdom Hall squeaky clean because they had their bath in the account set. And then they go home and they repeat the process on the way home. Then they repeat the process for the next congregation meeting, and they never miss meetings. Would you be willing to do that? We have an example that we'll share with the group on tomorrow afternoon about a brother and his determination to get to the district convention. And it gives us some food for thought when we think about what our brothers are willing to do. See, but Jehovah fortifies them. They get to the meeting and they discover that the meetings are so important and so valuable for them that it's worth the effort. And then those meetings fortify them to go back into their community and preach the good news. You know, in fact, the meetings can be so helpful that in one country, when they were undergoing a war-torn era, our brothers had to flee their homes and they had to go live out in the out country, and they had a real tough time making a living and providing food for their family. And the Watchtower said that before they had to leave their homes and live in the jungle, they averaged about 17 hours a publisher in that country. And now they're living under the stars. They're scrounging for food and for heating fuel and things like that. And our brothers in that country average 20 hours a month in the field service. You ever hear the old expression, when the going gets tough, the tough get going? I guess that's what happened in Liberia. Our brothers discovered that the ministry was a safeguard and it was a real help for them, so they put more effort into it. You know, we'll discover the same thing when it comes to this old world, of the pressures that are being put upon us and the pressure for us to conform. We'll discover that our ministry, far from being a burden, is a real protection. It helps us to keep our faith firmly focused in our minds. It helps us to see how different we are and should be from the world around us. And Jehovah can fortify us to be different and accomplish the work again. You know, we have so many examples that we point to of individuals that were fortified for the work. As we hear about experiences like our brother in El Salvador, our brothers in Liberia, we hear about the young girls and young brothers like Chioma. We read about Peter and John and their determination. We read about David and Moses and Noah. You know, and the same thing comes echoing out. If they can do it, we can do it. And really that's the message that Jehovah wants us to hear. That if he fortifies them to accomplish the work despite obstacles and pressures and troubles, he'll help us. So we do hope that our discussion this week and the things that we discussed this week, our time in the ministry, will prove to be a real encouragement and a strengthening to you. My wife and I look forward to it, and we look forward to being able to spend some more time with you in your home and get to know you a little better. The one thing we haven't told you is what our meeting's going to be about. And let's see here, so let's get the rest of our schedule. Tomorrow evening we're going to make a change. A lot of the brothers tell me that they're going to be going over to Mississippi to rebuild houses so that the next hurricane can blow them down. But they're going to be going to Mississippi to rebuild houses. And so we're going to have our ministerial servant and elders meeting tomorrow night here at the Kingdom Hall, 7 o'clock, so that those brothers that go to help our brothers and sisters in need will not be missed out on that meeting. Then Thursday evening, we're going to have our congregation book study. Brother Alvin is preparing to conduct that book study for us, so we encourage you to prepare well. We looked it over last night, and there's a lot of information in there. Some deep prophecy, some history. But put your thinking cap on. Don't be intimidated. Jehovah will fortify you. You can survive our book study. Get your hand up, get it over with, and Jehovah's blessing will be with us for our book study. Brother Alvin will appreciate the help that you give me on the book study. Then after our book study, we're going to talk about paying attention to ourselves so that we can fully accomplish the work that Jehovah gives us. Our public talk on Sunday at 10 o'clock is Why Be Guided by the Bible. And then we're going to follow that with a service talk entitled Take Exquisite Delight in Jehovah Himself. So there's a little brief summary of our week, and our time is gone. It's time for us to go home. So how about we sing a song of praise to Jehovah, and then we'll ask Brother Ray to close our meeting with a prayer. The song that we've selected is song number 92, entitled Preach with Boldness. And so you would stand at this convenience, and we'll sing out about preaching with boldness.